Ladies and gentlemen, are we having fun yet? Woo! David Blaine, he really needs no introduction, but I'm going to try anyway. Magician, illusionist, endurance artist. He has set and broken several world records in endurance. He was also the first one really to do street magic. David Blaine, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Everyone knows your stunts. Why do you do it?
My last stunt was I walked here with just this on. I had my daughter on FaceTiming saying, "Papa, aren't you cold? You're going to get sick." I said, "I think I'll make it." I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I was raised by a single mother, and she worked multiple jobs to give me the best of everything, education, anything that she could, and I would carry a deck of cards everywhere that I went. She had given it to me when I was about 5 years old. And for me, this deck of cards, it just felt, it was like it wasn't like a toy. It felt like something incredible, like something that only parents would use or grown-ups. And I would carry it everywhere that I went. And one day, while I was waiting for her to finish work, I was at the New York Public Library. And in the library, this librarian just said, "Oh, we got this little book of self-working card tricks. Do you want to try to learn one?" And I was like, "Yeah."
You were how old?
I was like 5 or something like that. And so she walked me through this very simple mathematical trick. And when my mother showed up to come get me, I did it to her. And because she's a loving mother, she was like, "Ah!" Like it's amazing. So it was not amazing, but I believed it was amazing. So I wanted to continue to impress her. So I would just try to learn more and more magic. And then I started if I would be at her restaurant that she was working at, I would stand up on the chair and I would perform to everybody. So, I just started to get that love and the impulse of just always trying to perform. I didn't realize at the point in time that that's just repetition, which is practice. So it's not that, I'm good at what I do necessarily by default. It's like I've spent a lot of time practicing, performing.
How much time?
Exact. Well, you can assume every day for about, almost 39 years, probably hours a day. The last 20 years, probably most of the time, like 6 hours a day with a deck of cards. Or even just thinking. Now, at the same time, I would go to the YMCA, and sometimes I'd wait for her to pick me up there, and I was on the swim team, and I did karate. And on the swim team, because I was born with my feet turned in, I couldn't swim like the other kids. And in Brooklyn, a kid without a dad, it's not good to be the last, you get picked on. So what I started to do is while I was swimming, I realized that if I didn't have to turn my head to breathe, I could actually swim further and faster. So I was able to keep up with the fastest of them. The coach would say, "Stop doing that," but I just didn't listen. I would just keep going and doing laps. And then what started to happen was people were like, "Whoa, he just did 3 laps without breathing." And then what would happen is the older kids would come to watch. And then I would compete against the older kids, not doing laps. I would just go underwater, hold my breath, and they would hold with me, but then they'd go up and down, like 5 times while I held on one breath. I didn't even realize at the time that by staying still and not doing anything, that's way more effective than going up quickly, taking a breath, and coming back down. So that was the beginning of my first experience with what I call endurance, the ability to use your mind to control your body. And then I had a karate teacher named Prince at the YMCA around the same time, and in the winter, in the snow, he would make us run barefoot. And all of the kids hated doing it because it was so like, this is too much. I don't want to do this. But I loved it because it made me a kid with the legs turned in. I felt like tougher than the circumstance. So that was the beginning of me loving to do these things where I use my mind to override the body and what it says. And I realized it's pretty effective that way. You can really do things that scientists and doctors, would normally say, "Oh, that's not possible."
So when did you first think, actually, I want to make a living out of magic? What started this?
I haven't thought about that yet, and that's why this is a weird place for me to be. I'm not good at that part of it.
But when do you start, you think actually, instead of focusing on the magician, I want to do street magic and focus on the reactions of the people?
No, that was a constant, because I used to always love doing magic to my mother and her friends. And back in the late 70s, my mother was like macrobiotic and a health nut. You know, we had seaweed in the cabinets and stuff like that, which was weird. So her friends were obviously really into that whole, you know, health nutrition, or they say health nut back then. So they were all very spiritual and things like that. So when a 5-year-old is doing magic to them that seems like I'm doing something real, I would like stare off and then stare back at them and do a trick, and they'd all go crazy because they thought I was doing something really bizarre. But it really was just a card trick. So I realized it was all how you present it.
Okay, so remind me or tell me what your first, favorite stint was, your first endurance. Your first or your favorite, actually?
Well, I'll tell you what my first one was, my first public one. I had started fasting when I was younger. I read Siddhartha, and he talks about standing, fasting, waiting, and how that's so important to override your body and all that stuff. So, I read that at age 11 or something. So I started to just see how long I could go with just water and things like that. So I was already curious about that. Then my first public stunt was 1999, and I buried myself alive in a coffin for 7 days and 7 nights. It was a stunt that Houdini wanted to do, but he had died before he had the chance to do it, although he, I think, was going to do a version that was a short version, not a long version. I started to think the Indian fakirs that would do it would go underground. You wouldn't be able to see them, and then they get pulled out of the coffin about a month later, and suddenly they reemerged, but they had secretly hidden away. So I thought, well, why not just really do it? Like, why not just lay in a coffin for a week? It seems very doable.
And you were never scared?
Well, what I did is I put a coffin in my living room at the house I was staying at, and I would just practice sleeping in it and staying in it and not getting out of it. So eventually I got up to like 4 days. I learned that if you fast and you don't need the toilet and things like that, and I would use a trucker's tube, meaning you urinate into a little bag or whatever, not to talk about that. But so, and then what happened was I started realizing, oh, well then, yeah, if I could do 4 days, I'm certain I can do 7. So usually I don't go to the full distance. I usually estimate just over half. And then once I get to the halfway mark, I count backwards and push to the end.
I mean, are people around you telling you, actually, no, David, stop, this is crazy?
Yeah, everybody.
And you just block them out, or you say, no, I can do this? Do you reassure them, or just
I listen to all the doctors, all my friends, and then just try to override their theories on why it can't be done. Yeah, which is very easy to do. I have a friend that was a physiologist up at NASA, and he would look into records of how long people survived starvation, how long people could survive without oxygen. So I already knew that there was, when I did the breath hold, I did 20 minutes and 2 seconds with a bunch of scientists and doctors around. I was underwater. My heart rate dropped to 8 beats per minute, and they freaked out and pulled me up. I could have kept going, by the way. Yeah, but so I look into what has been done, and then I realized, if you breathe pure oxygen first, you flush out the CO2. The reason that we have to breathe is not because of the O2 deprivation, it's because of the CO2 buildup in the bloodstream, which makes the pain arise. So if you can override the pain, then you can actually push yourself and not black out, and that's what I learned to do.
But what's the process? So you think you're, at dinner, and you think, actually, you know what I really want to do for my next endurance, or what's the process?
Well, so the process on that specific one was, I remembered I always loved holding my breath, and I used to win bets when I was like a teenager. I would do like 7 laps in a pool and collect hundreds of dollars and stuff like that. So I was thinking, like, why not do something where I hold my breath? But I didn't understand what it was. So I think I started just fantasizing about the water tank. And I started thinking, well, what if I made a sphere-shaped water tank, like a marble, and then put it in the middle of New York City, like Lincoln Center, which is where we ended up putting it. And then that marble was there, and then I could live there for as long as possible. Then I found out the longest a human was submerged completely underwater was 5 days and 5 nights. So I said, okay, I'm going to go 7 days and 7 nights. And I spoke to him, and he told me all about it and what you have to do, which is just mental preparation. And I remained there for a week, which actually allowed me to get familiar with the situation. And then at the end, I went for the world record holding my breath and failed, but it was still fun.
Is it always fun? How much, so from the moment you think about it to the moment you actually realize it, is it years? Is it months?
Usually it's years, yeah.
Okay, is there one stunt that you would do again?
I would do them all again except for the one in London where I did 44 days in a box with just water. And the reason I wouldn't do that again is because I started to have like minor organ problems, so failure, not complete failure, but just like stuff started working. And I lost 33% of my BMI, my bone mass index, and everything had shrunk. And I think I was very close to going past the threshold where there would be no return. And I think if I did that one again, I don't know if the body would survive that. So therefore, I wouldn't do it again, but that was my favorite one to do.
Because you saw the audience?
No, the reason it was my favorite one to do is because when you remove everything, like all temptations, taste, any impulse that you have to fulfill some sort of endorphin in the brain, anything, when you take all the dopamines out, I think you build a serotonin level in the brain, which is very meditative and incredible. So while I was there, I started to look around and I was like, whoa, I noticed how beautiful the color blue was, which they say during starvation fasting, you see colors differently. And then I would watch the sun go up and down the entire day for almost 44 days. And there's nothing equal to that. So it was like, ironically, by doing something so extreme, it was one of the most beautiful experiences that I've ever had, other than everything related to my daughter. But, yeah.
Do people believe you? I mean, do they think it's fake?
I think there's a lot of people that think because I'm a magician that there must be a trick to it. And that makes sense, because if I saw a magician do any of these things, I'd be like, okay, like I wouldn't believe any of it. But I think it's actually, ironically, it's actually easier to do it than to fake it. So it's the real version of it is more plausible in most cases. And also, at the end of it, if you fake it, it doesn't feel right. It feels like you pulled an illusion over the audience. So I like to really do things. And then what I do for my own personal, and I don't really put this out there, but we had like an article published in the New England Journal of Medicine where they explain the effects of fasting on prolonged fasting, which is called the refeeding syndrome, which most people, even my doctor, who is a top starvation expert, one of the top guys in the world, Jeremy Peltuck, but he didn't think that I was really doing it until the end. He thought I must have been cheating somehow, but if I was cheating, my body wouldn't have done what it had to do to survive. It would have kept probably burning as opposed to going into starvation mode, and I would have went through everything quicker. So because I really did it, it was much better. But when I went to the hospital, he thought they assumed I was doing something. When he put the IV into me, my phosphate levels shot through the roof, which is how many people have died that were in starvation mode. So then he used all that information, and it was that's kind of like the believable part afterwards. But I think very few people get to see that.
I mean, so when you do one of these, then you have to go to hospital to check you're okay, but also, I mean, do you do it for medical research to get blood tests?
Always, yeah. And I give all my blood, I give all the tests, urine, everything, so they can just see and study everything. Because in most cases, when people push themselves to that level of an extreme deprivation to the body, it's not usually, it's usually like a protest or it's done anti-government. But when I do it, it's the opposite. So I let everybody have whatever they want.
Would you do the same if you didn't have an audience?
I would probably cheat.
But do you feed off the reaction?
Yeah, I'm going to do 44 days and then I'll be, look at me now. Do I look like I'm doing it with those? Put 50 pounds on to the last 3 months, which I have to lose in 3 months. That's annoying. Yeah.
Is there anything you're planning?
Oh, yeah.
But we can't.
I have the best one that I've been dreaming of forever, and I'm working on it diligently now. I think it's a good one.
What can you tell us? What city?
Nope.
Nope.
No, but that in this day and age, it doesn't matter what city because everything is online. And I haven't done anything like that since the day of Instagram and it was all pre. As a matter of fact, when I was doing my first TV special, YouTube had just come out afterwards, and people started to put my secrets out there. And suddenly non-magicians were walking up to me and doing tricks from my first show, Street Magic. And that's when I started to think maybe I should do things that are real, that are almost impossible, or at least look impossible, and combine that with magic. Because by doing that, if they do research or pass the secrets around and they're right, it's actually more interesting than the trick itself. So I started to reverse engineer after my first TV show, and that is when I buried myself alive, was right after the first show, because I wanted to do things that I thought looked impossible but could actually be done.
Is the audience different in London to New York, or does everyone react the same way?
I think the audience is the same, but I think the media is very different, which is interesting. So I think in London there's just much more media, so I think the stories are much faster, but now it's different because with Instagram and everything going viral, it doesn't matter. But yeah, the London media made the stunt, because otherwise it's a guy doing nothing for 44 days. But because they said, oh, he's getting bombed, this and that, he's getting eggs, so suddenly people would come to see all this insanity. I mean, it was very rare that it happened, but it made it exciting, hypothetically.
Talk to us about, so we talked about your favorite one, the one that you wouldn't do again. Is there one that you would have done different with hindsight?
All of them. Yeah, if I could go back and redo all of them, they'd be smaller and more difficult.
Why more difficult?
Like the box in London would have been much tighter. I don't know, because I think, I could have pushed it that much more.
But do you think you'll come back to them? Not the one in London, but the others?
Well, the breath hold, I was thinking I could have gone longer and then I would have blacked out and they could have pulled me out. But that's not really good for the audience. You know?
What does the audience want? Do you know? Do you ever ask them?
No, I don't ask. I usually just think about what I want to do and then try to figure out how to do it. And I think every decision that I make is usually based on just, dreaming, thinking, tweaking, figuring it out. But if you start asking everybody what they want, then you'll never get anywhere.
Okay, magic, endurance, what do you prefer? Do you ever combine them?
Yeah, I always put the two together, and I think that's kind of... I think what it does is it adds to the trick, because the believability goes up, because they see something that they aren't sure, like how could this be an illusion? Then when you combine it with something real, I think it becomes really, it becomes something more engaging to the audience.
And so when did you start combining them?
Do you guys want to see an example of that? Yeah, but the combination. But it's a little graphic. It's like, are you sure? Yeah? Okay.
A little bit scared.
Maybe, is it possible, can somebody help me that hasn't seen me do anything before? Is there anybody in the room that hasn't seen me do anything? You've not seen anything? Do you want to help as well? And will you help also?
Yeah.
Okay. If you could come up on stage. And what's your name?
Avantika.
Avantika, nice to meet you, Avantika. Great, and could I?
My notes?
No, could I put this on, could I use camera mode and put it on video? And actually, I'm going to reverse this so I can see. Oh, great, and if you could hold that about here, that's perfect. So this is the needle and thread trick. Come a little closer. So here's what happens. I need exactly this much, let's say.
I think the interview's over.
Thank you very much. Watch your step going back. I just need a second to clean up. Sorry. If this was for TV, this part would be edited out, but
But it's live.
little speck of blood there. That's why I have some alcohol pads. The blood looks pretty real too, right? All right, thank you.
I'm not sure whether we can continue the interview or not. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Sure. Is
You're
it
fine?
bleeding or it looks all right?
It's fine.
I have more alcohol pads just in case.
How many times a week do you do these kind of, how much do you have to practice for something like that?
Well, before I flew here, I actually did this illusion where frogs start jumping out of my mouth. So I had all of these frogs with me. I didn't bring them to Zurich.
But you practice, I mean, are you obsessed when you think about something new? Is it all you do all day long?
Yeah,
I think about
it all the time. Write, think, play, hang out with magicians. Before I was here, I was with a big group of magicians at a gathering, just watching these incredible geniuses doing these amazing acts. So I study, work with, think, some alone with others, and there's guys out there that are mind-blowing, that are just incredible artists. They're not, you can't really see them anywhere. They're not public, but they're my favorites.
And so you kind of, is it like a forum of magicians? How many times a year do you meet up? Do you exchange tricks or
most of my
ideas?
best friends are magicians, so I spend lots of time with these guys, and that's all we do is brainstorm, think, discuss old ideas, look at new concepts, pamphlets, lithographs from 100, 200 years ago, etc.
You don't do this for money, do you? This is like a passion.
Well, it is a passion, and what I do to never cloud my decisions is whenever I make a decision, I always try to decide, like, would I do this for $1? So the idea is, like, if I'm offered some gig or something, if the answer is no, then I won't do it for any amount of money, and if the answer is yes, then I'll do it for whatever the deal is. So in order to never be clouded by the wrong decision, I always ask myself, would I do this if it was for $1? So that keeps my head clear. It's not financially rewarding, but it keeps me focused on what I want to achieve and do.
Do you do magic for your daughter?
She does magic to me all the time, and she's way better than I'll ever be already. And she's turning 8.
At cards?
Yeah, she's better at everything. Yeah, it's crazy.
Are you doing anything? So we can't know what you're doing next. Do you know when?
Maybe the alcohol and the blood is all just to make you think it was real. It's all. I think it'll be in 2019 or 2020 or 2021 or somewhere in there.
David, how big is your team? Is it
my team is small, but they're incredible. Yeah, my team is small, but they're my favorite team that you could ask for. So I'm lucky.
How many magic tricks do you do overall? Is there a number? Do you know, like 200?
I think I could go on for days nonstop. Just
really?
Yeah.
Like 500?
Way more than that. Yeah. And then always I'm inventing them as I'm doing them quite often. So it's like all day and night I'm jamming. Like on the airplane coming here, I'm doing magic to the people on my right, my left, and you know, the whole crew. And I always do that. And it's fun for me to do it, but it's also practice. Like the more you do it, the more you learn, because you say, oh, what if I do this? What if I do that? So it's nonstop practice is how I look at it. So when people say, oh, you don't have to work, I'm like, no, I'm not working. I'm doing what I love, but I'm practicing continuously. And it helps me become better and better, which is the only thing that matters, is to try to be the best that you can be at what you love doing, I think.
Do we need more magic? I mean, the reaction was amazing, actually. Do we need a little bit, is it escapism? Do you think?
I think magic is important, not just in this day and age, but always. I think magic helps people think about things that they may think about as impossible, and then suddenly think, well, if this is possible, maybe this is possible. So I think that magicians have been historically important because of that.
I know we need to wrap up because we're almost out of time. I could speak to you for another 3 hours, but what is the one thing that you hope to give back? Is it pushing the limits? Is it telling people actually?
No, when I was a kid, like I said, I grew up without a dad. So like one of my heroes was Houdini. I'd look at this book of all these incredible images and designs and things that he had done, the artistic interpretation of his ideas that he worked really hard on. And I would dream about, oh, maybe I could like do my own version of that. So ultimately, I just like the idea of like inspiring somebody to think that they can do whatever they want in whatever it is, even if it's weird or outside of the box or whatever.
Okay, just a curiosity, how many pack of cards do you own at home at any one time?
Warehouse is full. Yeah, because when I was a kid and I had one deck of cards, it was so hard to use, and I kept it over and over all the time for years. I was like, one day I'm going to have as many cards as I need, and yeah, now I have that. Not much else, but that I have.
David Blaine, thank you so much, and thank you so much for showing us your magic.